Oh, hi, there we are. Oh, hey, hello, Tom.
Dave Foley, what the hell?
Welcome to Really with Tom and Dave. If you're out there, this will be our second installment of us trying to remember how we do this.
We're still back. We're
back.
still
We're
back,
backing,
baby.
Yes, we're back again.
We are so still back.
We're getting
This
more
is
and more
amazing.
back each time.
Putting a lot of our back into it.
Yeah.
Ooh, we want to. Yeah, no, sorry.
No, wait. Can we go back now and stop that?
I'll leave that to you.
Yep.
We are very excited to. We're sort of getting our, our shit back together here with our new
Yes.
partners at SpectreVision. So these are our
Yes.
sort of. It's almost like a extra cut. This is sort of the extra content of Really as we.
Yeah, this is gearing up. This is us going. Do I remember how to ride a bike?
Yes. Yes.
And hopefully we do. And then again, we'll as we go further along and we get more organized. We think the podcast will evolve a little bit.
We're gonna have new segments. We're gonna have
Yeah.
the "Fuck Really" segment, which will start us off. What's that gonna be, Dave?
That's going to be we're going to look at the issues of the UFO phenomena or other reality challenging phenomena that we don't want to believe, that we would rather not have be true.
Make them go away.
Yeah, and because there's always that fear that no matter how crazy something sounds, or no matter how someone who comes forward with something might be depicted as being just a lunatic. Often you then later find out, oh no, they were right.
Oh yeah.
And so we want to look at those things before we're forced to accept them.
So many things.
Yes, and hopefully be allowed to continue to reject something.
These things come at us daily. In fact, if our listeners out there have a suggestion for "fuck really," then please put them in the comments section on YouTube. You can go to our Instagram and let us know what's making you stay up at night, questioning reality and concerned about the alien invasion. 2027, all sorts of things. Things coming.
Yeah.
There's now a meteor headed towards us. There's all sorts of great stuff in our future. The takeover of AI. We're not limiting it just to alien concerns.
I'm still worried about the 2012 Mayan calendar predictions.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping. Can I let go of that now? I can.
You can.
Oh,
That and Y2K.
Good.
These are
That's a lot of stress.
Been around as long as we have. We've lived through a few of these apocalyptic scenarios, and God damn it, we're still here.
Yeah, and Jesus hasn't come back yet. So there you go.
Not that we know. Well, listen, we had to come back. I mean, they're still putting graphics together. We're getting our new music together, but we couldn't.
Oh, hold on, my vacuum just started.
Perhaps our next segment should be the autonomous electronics in your house that are apparently in operation on their own.
Yeah. Well, it's following instructions I gave it so far.
Okay.
My robot vacuum.
A foreshadowing of our AI future.
Yeah, but there's no way to know that it's not just biding its time.
I'd hope you sleep with the door closed in your bed and keep that thing.
I woke up the other night
away from you.
I woke up the other night and my robot vacuum was sitting on my chest, just staring at me.
Yeah, that's probably a bad sign.
I don't. Yeah, well, I'm not a technician. I'm not a.
Listen,
a
what
roboticist.
you do in the privacy of your own home with your vacuum cleaner is your goddamn business. Okay.
Yeah. I wish it weren't. I wish it weren't even my business.
Yeah, but apparently it is.
Yeah.
Apparently that's your version of her.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to segue out of this.
Okay, but we want to talk about. Well, we want to talk about one of the major events recently. I guess we're going to talk about. You say.
I'll
Mr.
say.
Barber.
Here's what I'll say. I'll say this last fucking 7 months that we've been off the air just happened to be the most cataclysmic and important and insane UAP stretch that we've had in our lifetimes. That's what I'll say. 2023, David Grush, Leslie Kean, New York Times 2017, all that. I think we first of all, we're still living through this drone phenomenon.
Yeah, yeah.
And just as an addendum, and we're going to continue to cover this because Cory Booker, senator of New Jersey, just last week, utterly disputed this pathetic Trump administration explanation, which was, it was just FAA research, these thousands of drones that have been seen all up and down the East Coast, in the Midwest, in California, in Portugal, in Indonesia. It's just the FAA doing some research.
Yes.
Cory Booker said that's baloney.
Yeah, well, under oath,
the
FAA testified under oath that they had no idea what it was months ago.
So here you have a United States senator throwing cold water on that stupid, ridiculous description, and it's still happening. They're still in New York. They're still in Jersey. They're seen in California. So we are still living through a swarm of UAP that is historic, that is ongoing, that has completely no explanation. Not one of them has been recovered. Not one of them has been traced back to its point of origin, or certainly they haven't told the public. And why not, if they have? And that remains an absolute bafflement. But while that was going on, our dear friend Ross Coulthart, he's not my dear friend. I don't, I think I'm going to guess he's a Kids in the Hall fan.
I don't think so. I patted him on the arm at the Soul Foundation.
You patted him on the arm?
I did. I walked past him and went, "Hey," and that's all the interaction I had with him.
Did he respond in that low, sort of syrupy voice?
He just gave me He gave me a g'day.
G'day.
Continue talking to whoever he was actually interested in.
At the Soul Conference, he was he had a bit of an energy, right? Bit of an energy about him. That was.
Yeah, and he was set up there doing a number of interviews with that have come out since then.
Yeah,
like his extended interviews with Gary Nolan.
Yes.
Yes.
So Ross is the kind of most sort of, let's say, respected UAP journalist in the mainstream media. If we can now say News Nation is the mainstream, which I think we can. They've got
News Nation. It's
some good folks. I like Chris Cuomo.
Yeah, they're a legit news channel.
I'm going to give them in this strange new age of what is truth and what is not. We can just sort of throw them in there. They're sort of vaguely in the pot. Yeah. However, he announced that he had a whistleblower interview that with the big kind of the big news being actual footage of a UAP recovery. So for all the people in the world, all the skeptics, they were going to actually show and a recovery of some sort of NHI, non-human intelligence technology, and then he was going to have an interview with this guy. So I just need to ask you, what were your impressions? And then we'll show it to our the audience that watches us and not just listening. But what were your impressions of the egg, first of all?
Well, first I got to go back a little further and say that this is the other thing people have been saying. Well, we need firsthand witness, and this would be the first vetted firsthand witness who's come forward as a whistleblower.
And yet he did not. He claimed, because yes, we're going to get to Jake Barber, who's a special forces pilot, who claimed that he had recovered multiple craft or objects that were of non-human origin, but he didn't take credit for the footage that was apparently independently
from another
verified
team
and received by Ross Coulthart and his team. But I am just, because Jake Barber's a whole kettle of, there's a lot there. So I'm just like, what did you think? I mean, what did you think? Were you overwhelmed, underwhelmed, whelmed?
I was really, I guess, blown away by the testimony. The video itself, I'd say, it's weird looking, but I can see where people are just going to go, well, we're not seeing it flying, so how do we know it? But it is definitely a bizarre object that is being retrieved by a helicopter, and that was Jacob Barber's job. his job was the recovery and transportation of craft. And he said, I mean, he was trained to do this, not necessarily just for UAP, but this was something he did for like when American assets would go down behind, in hostile territory. Their job was to go in and get it back.
Right.
Or if equipment from an adversary goes down somewhere, they can get in and retrieve it to try and learn from it. So so the idea is that this was the training that these very, very sort of a secretive branch of the military, they're trained to do this. So when the issue of a UAP recovery comes along, then it's only natural that the people who have been trained to do recoveries, clandestine recoveries, would be the ones that you would call on. They're the only people that have any experience doing anything similar. So that's kind of how he comes into it, that he was trained not for UAP recovery, but when UAPs would show up or be brought in, they would be the guys who naturally would be brought in. But then eventually that became part of his regular assignment, was going out and retrieving anomalous things.
Crissy, do you have the egg video?
Crissy often just gets bored and wanders off.
Yeah. No, look at this. Come on. Look at this organization we got going here. So we're looking at this night vision. We're sort of
and that tether is about 150 feet long, according to Jacob Barber.
And it looks like some sort of desert landscape, and it is a white, large. I mean, it looks about the size of like a, Volkswagen Beetle.
Well, I know Barber in his interview said he estimated it was about 20 feet in length from top to bottom. And so it's a pretty large object. It's perfectly smooth. It has no flight surfaces, control surfaces. He said no apparent means of propulsion. But this is something, and here's where it gets really weird. Is he said that this was a craft, well, maybe not that one in particular, but the one that he recovered, because he said this is not footage of his team,
which may or may not be to
may
protect
or may not
himself.
Be true.
Who knows?
Yeah. Yes, because whoever did release this was violating, secrecy. Oop, there we go. So whoever did release it is potentially in harm's way in terms of prosecution. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he said that that this wasn't a crash. The stuff he was going to pick up, they weren't crashes. That they were working in tandem with psionic operatives, psionic agents. And psionic agents are agents trained in telepathy, using telepathy to communicate with non-human intelligences and craft. They apparently are able to, he said, invite these craft in. And then when they come in, the psionic agents can actually take control of the craft and bring them down.
Yeah, this was a good candidate for a very first "fuck really" segment, which certainly could still qualify. And you're definitely like the order of the events in the Coulthard's sort of initial special, which was in December, I believe. Mm-hmm. Was we've got the first footage of an actual UAP craft recovery. We've got a whistleblower. They interviewed Jake Barber. He talked about the egg, the finding of the egg, and then in sort of the second part of this special, I may have recommended to producers that they keep this to a subsequent special because it's so much to absorb in this 1 hour. Was this idea that that they had psionic assets, telepathic special forces people or people working for special forces that could communicate with these craft and in some cases literally summon them and then take control of them.
Yes, pilot them.
Which is a lot.
Telepathically.
For me, that's a lot, and I'm not at this point. Who am I to judge what the fuck is going on? I don't. This is why we're talking about it, right? This is a lot is happening here, and I think the important thing to point out, like, is that the people. I think I can say this. We both consider the most credible on this issue, the most sort of legit, the most kind of interested in the truth, and no bullshit, vouch for this guy. Whether it's the Gary Nolans, the Ross Coultharts, the Lou Elizondos,
George Knapp's,
the George Knapp. They all say that Jake Barber, this helicopter pilot, is who he says he is a is a hero. That he. Sorry, I'm getting a spam call. I should probably take this. So there's a lot of with something like this. There's then all this like chatter online and blah blah blah, and he's not this and it's not that, and look at this. All I can say is like we are pretty, I think, precise about who we listen to, who we don't listen to. We have a pretty good bullshit detector, and to the extent possible, without ourselves being in the military, it seems like this guy is at least did what he says he did. Was very close to the action, and then he said he would sort of get, he worked for all these sort of 3-letter agencies that would send him on these recovery missions, and sometimes it would be experimental U.S. tech. And sometimes it would be this anomalous, clearly, utterly different tech. And one of the things I'll say as we bridge toward this discussion of psionic assets, one part of his interview, I found the guy utterly compelling. He seemed quite genuine. His emotions were very clear to see. I mean, this was someone who absolutely experienced something. He discussed the approach of one of these vehicles and as he was approaching in one of these recoveries, he was overwhelmed by emotion that he was then sort of re-experiencing during the interview. This sort of beautiful presence, this thing that completely sort of took him over, overwhelmed him. And I was riveted. I mean, I was amazed that, like, I was just amazed by the whole thing. I didn't quite know what to make of the egg. When I saw it, I went, that's really cool. And people are going to really rip this to shreds because it's not enough for people. And things don't look the way they want them to look. And it's going to be blah, blah, blah. It'll be a lot of like egg jokes, etc. But I still feel like there's something here for sure. And, but yeah, there definitely appears to be some sort of communication with between these sometimes downed craft and the pilots, notwithstanding an entire core of psionic people dealing with this craft. So what does this do to the conversation? Do you think it's too far for people? Do you think it's time to start talking about consciousness as it relates to these craft? Like what do you think?
I think it's definitely I mean, it is such a common experience of people who have had contact with with UAP or with non-human intelligence. The accounts always involved telepathy, and some kind of a consciousness interaction. Going back to when we interviewed Mario Woods, who was at Ellsworth missile base. He said that these beings communicated with him telepathically, and they were able to read his thoughts and respond to them. They were able to become aware of his fears and address them. And so there's, and everyone everyone who tells the story of coming across, non-human beings, they always say they communicated, and the answer is always, how did you understand them? Well, it was telepathic. The communication is always telepathic. It's very rare that anyone discusses hearing these beings speaking or making any kind of noise.
In that South African school, the kids, in that sort of very famous sighting that John Mack investigated, they were...
Yeah, the aerial phenomenon.
The aerial
school.
event was, they all were given visions of the future, images in their mind, voices in their mind. No, it's an absolutely, it's ubiquitous in the discussion. I think the idea... part of the bits of my blown mind through all of this has been the sort of synchronistic, or this kind of convergence of stories at the same time, as though almost by design, or I don't know, but because you have the telepathy tapes, which is this like #1 podcast now, which is
remarkable,
incredible account of non-speaking neurodivergent children and their telepathic relationships with their mothers or their caregivers, and that podcast is absolute must listen.
Everyone should listen. It's like it is one of it is. I think it really is. I think it falls into the category of paradigm shifting.
Yeah, it makes it, and it also makes this incredible argument about how much of our settled science has allowance for things like autistic savants and prodigies, kids that have inexplicable talents, expertise, languages that they speak at ages that that they haven't been exposed to, or that they're...
And there's no working theory for it.
The science accepts it.
Science. Yeah. They accept that it's real because
it happens.
Yeah, but there's no working theory for how it's possible.
No.
And again, it's one of the things that often with mainstream science, if they have no working theory for something that is clearly impossible happening, they just go, let's not talk about it.
Yes.
Let's leave that to weirdos.
And that's where this whole debate now about the material science and materialism and this idea that really has dominated science for the past 200 years. That we're what you can see, feel, or what you can touch. This idea that consciousness is this sort of exclusive, very kind of elite, special, niche aspect of science that sort of exists at the very tippy top of the pyramid, that consciousness may be something there, whereas the argument that it all starts with consciousness, and that there's that the pyramid is upside down of science, that we don't start with sort of physics, chemistry, biology, etc., and so forth, and then reach the tippy top, that the top is the bottom, that consciousness is everywhere and everything. And I only bring up the telepathy tapes because now this is in the conversation everywhere, and now it relates to the UAP conversation in a big, big way. And it's not because just we talk about niche topics. This is out there in the everybody's talking about it. It's there to be experienced and learned about, and how and why this is all happening now, I don't know, but it makes me take Jake Barber's account more seriously, given the fact that there's this incredibly compelling new story about telepathy from this totally different place, that it's just and so much of it seems to just like reaching this sort of point. And just to finish the thing, like when we were at Saul, I'm sure you recall that there was some debate about, we should be talking about the nuts and bolts of UAP. We should be talking about danger to pilots. We should be talking about, they want to talk about basically the material aspects of it. which leaves out this entire part of the debate. In fact, Whitley Strieber like stood up and was kind of saying like, what about experiencers? You know, what about consciousness? You know, what about this? And it felt like, well, to push through with the government, we have to deal with, you know, the stuff you can knock on, you know, the stuff you can bang on some real metal disc. And yet here we are, and it appears that our government is up to their eyeballs in consciousness interaction with non-human intelligence.
Yeah, and it fits into the a broader history that we know that that in the when did they start it? In the 90s. Was it that Stanford Research Institute with Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff were working for this I can't remember when they started it. But they were working for the CIA, basically doing research on remote viewing. And, you know, it's hard to argue that their results weren't good. There's an awful lot of really good, solid evidence that they got great information. They got actionable intelligence out of these remote viewers. And, you know, the program was funded on the books for 20 years by the CIA, and then was shut down. But then, you know, everyone basically says it continued in other forms.
And having done a lot of research and read a lot about it for work, for writing projects and stuff, it always seemed like you could find just as many accounts that said, we didn't get anything, blah, blah, blah. It was nothing. And then you would get these first-hand accounts of people that had experienced it, had gone through incredible, like it was really 50-50 kind of back and forth, hard to know. And what I would say is what's coming out now seems to legitimize this idea that these were successful projects, very secretive projects. And one of the things that I always found creepy and fascinating about these accounts from remote viewers was that they would encounter other intelligences during their little journey. So I'm gonna, they send me to go look at this, but something else is watching them.
Well, and it's also for people to think it was shut down. I mean, we know, like Lou Elizondo is revealed in his book Imminent, and again, Lou Elizondo, who ran ATIP for the Pentagon, which came out of OSAP when OSAP was kind of folding up, that he was trained in remote viewing and used it in his intelligence work, used it in his counterterrorism work. He credits it with saving his life when on missions in either Iraq or Afghanistan. I can't remember now.
And I mean, the fact that it goes even, well, it's even crazier. The stuff that Jake Barber was getting into, and again, it's by all accounts, he is who he says he is, which is, he's been vouched for by Gary Nolan and Ross Coulthard. And Lou says he doesn't know him personally, but knows
and other military intelligence
people, and Lou says, people he's worked with have worked with him, and he's a pilot. He worked for the three-letter agencies and has just to cover some of the stuff he discussed, there's one anecdote of the health and safety issue of they picked up some box. Now they have, when these pilots are recovering materials, they have rigid protocols if there's a chance that there's radioactive substances involved.
Yes.
And yet they were sent to pick up a box. Something was inside this box. They picked up this box and something turned on and made everyone involved ill. Something happened with the object inside. They don't know what it is, and he didn't claim to know what it was, but he did know that it was behaving in a way that did not prescribe to their protocols. They were not warned in advance, and he says they all experienced massive hair loss and skin sloughing off their limbs afterwards. And
like a lot of things that seemed clearly to be the results of being exposed to some kind of intense radiation.
Yes, that had avoided detection before, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Yes,
he,
and that
yeah.
and that in going into it, you're right. That they had none of their usual protocols in place for dealing with anything that was radioactive.
Yeah, they would have hazmat suits normally. They would have a way to sort of treat that to protect themselves. So this was a case that, and he also alluded to what sounded like a UFO James Bond type scenario where their intelligence changed. They sounded like they were working for a private contractor. He gave it a sense that it was one of the, kind of big guys, whether it's Northrop Grumman or Lockheed. That they were sent to recover sort of these battlefield laptops or some kind of
They said,
hardware.
a bunch of tough books. I guess they're called. What are they? I forget who makes them. The tough books, but Toshiba tough books.
They were sent in to retrieve these things because they had like these UAP secrets on them, and then they got the sense that they were being double crossed. They were being set up. It just was going to these places that I was like,
they were being.
What is happening here?
Yeah,
what are we? Wow.
They felt like their lives were in danger. That they were being set up to be assassinated.
Yes, that's basically where it was going. And
so they started, preparing to defend themselves from that. And just realized these guys are very, as I said, like Jake Barber when he's being interviewed, it seems like he talked a lot about how they are very tough guys, but they're also very sensitive guys. He said you'd be surprised at how much, how much of their emotional makeup is very deeply empathetic and in many ways very feminine. They have a very feminine sense of sort of emotional involvement, which he said is necessary for the work they do, like that ability to have empathy and intuition, but he also in the longer interview, at one point he talked about, like you said, are you worried about somebody coming after you now that you're disclosing all of this? And the longer interview, he says, well, if somebody comes after me, that will be the worst day of their lives. And he said, that'll be the worst decision they ever make. And he said, because I'm not afraid of the boogeyman. I am the boogeyman.
Goodness gracious. Did he really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that part.
Yes. That's in the extended interview with Ross Coulthart.
That's kind of how I talk.
Yeah. And you hear that and you go, okay, I believe him when he says he's the boogeyman.
I believe that he's, there's no question he's a soul. There's no question he just walked off the street and Ross Coulthart interviewed him. It's just not, that is not plausible. It's not, there's no sense to that whatsoever. Ross is a fairly careful guy. They know how many eyeballs are on this. Yeah. They know it's sort of like.
He'd been talking to Barber for almost 2 years before this interview. Vetting him and trying to convince him to go public. And I believe Barber was also in contact with our friends Jeremy and George, and so he was definitely reaching out to people that are in the disclosure movement.
So there's either a special forces UAP cult that are a bunch of sort of maniacs coming forward with completely, I suppose there's what I find to be sort of an eye roll argument of like the CIA puts assets out there to protect their special technology projects, which I'm sure cover stories have been made in the past to make up for. But I also think where there's smoke, there's incredible fire. And in this case, where there's fire, there's fire. I mean, just this is becoming... I just think the dam is breaking. I mean, I think, 2 years ago, we're talking to Gary Nolan about, just these are old programs that just can't withstand the pressure now. It's just like the old fortresses of secrecy can't handle social media. They can't handle the speed of things. They can't handle the whistleblowers. And I think the likelier aspect is that we're just seeing these crazy chunks of information breaking off into the public sphere, and You see the scramble. You see the scramble with the fucking drones. You just see a government that is just absolutely flat-footed and just
dishonest.
dishonest,
and
but
just clearly dishonest.
So obviously, yeah. So now we still have a media, and in this case, this includes the sort of free speech X folks, that Elon utterly silent on the drones issue.
Yeah,
like
Elon,
not one
MSNBC,
fucking opinion.
CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC.
There was some coverage. Because it was unavoidable. Because public officials, from deputies to sheriffs to local council people to mayors to governors to U.S. senators to state senators to House representatives, all across the board were coming forward and saying this is absolutely going on. This is a huge national security issue. They are over our most sensitive sites. No one has a fucking explanation.
Yeah, but immediately, as soon as what's her name, the new White House spokesperson.
She's a killer. I say that in a nonpartisan way. That woman's a killer.
Yeah. So as soon as she came out with the, don't worry, everybody, I've heard this directly from the president. These were FAA craft doing research and other things. That was the phrase. Research and other things.
The other things, I think, covers a lot of ground.
Yeah,
it doesn't, because other things doesn't even mean FAA research, just other things.
Other things, yeah.
That's what Trump said. Trump was like, oh, okay, it's other things. The FAA and other things. Tell him that.
Yeah, and then, but immediately, all coverage of it dried up.
Yeah.
There's no coverage of it.
Nope. No curiosity
as of
whatsoever.
that day. And which is odd for a press that doesn't believe anything else Trump says. Not one thing.
I don't.
But on this,
how do we square this circle?
But it's the same thing. It's that if it's on this subject, then any excuse, no follow-up questions, no challenges to it. Nobody, not one person at that press briefing said, "Well, why did the FAA deny this under oath?"
There were some. It was just. I just think it was. The die was cast. They had made their official statement, and that's what it was going to be.
Yeah. So no coverage now. Everyone's going, okay, that's our explanation. We'll go with it.
And yet they continue to be seen, and it remains the absolute most high-profile, inexplicable UFO swarm in the past 50 years, and is still ongoing.
Ongoing and global.
No explanation whatsoever, and beyond mysterious.
And it also ties into what happened in when was it 2022? The Russell swarm, the USS Russell off the West Coast that was swarmed by craft that were tracked on radar that kept appearing and disappearing, and that didn't seem to come from or go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it was the same thing. There was no, but again, at that time, the official story was, we believe they came off of a merchant marine vessel, a Chinese merchant marine vessel that was in port in San Francisco, I believe. And again, coverage just ended because the fact that actually officials boarded that ship and found nothing, the fact that nothing was done to that ship, because if they were doing that, that would mean they were spying on U.S. military, and they would all have been arrested and detained.
Yes.
So none of that happened. But the important thing is the press stopped covering it because they were told it was Chinese drones. And that's the pattern over and over again. The press is given any excuse to not do their job on this subject, will not do their job.
And it goes to the need and demand for citizen journalism and podcasts, to be quite honest. We joke about, like there's a lot, everybody has a UAP podcast. You kind of need them. You need them to sort of just kind of continue to sort of ring this bell, because we see the same old. We're in 2025 and we're watching the same movie from 1963. We're watching the same tired old playbook. So
and we're being told again and again and again that if you if you take this seriously, you're crazy.
Yeah,
Still.
and despite hundreds of thousands of witnesses and more public officials than I've ever seen come forward on this issue ever, whether they're our tech looking at NHI, whether they're NHI pretending to be our tech, there are so many anomalous elements to these drones that all of it gives credence to the Jake Barber story that is ongoing. I wanted to talk a little more about these psionic assets.
Yes.
First, I need to ask Dave, are you a psionic asset?
I am not. Wish I was, although I will say that my own UFO experience definitely involved an interaction on the level of consciousness.
Tell.
Well, in that I've discussed before, Jeremy Corbell and I, after we've been friends for a couple of years at that point, I guess. We were walking his dog in an orange grove, and I said, this would be a we were looking around. It was a great night, and I said, this would be a good night to see something, because neither of us had ever seen anything. And so I said that out loud, and 30 seconds later, Jeremy said, Dave, turn around. And I turned around, and there was this glowing orangey gold pulsing light object in the distance where I had just been looking, bigger than anything else in the sky. And we watched it circle the valley we were in and come up right in front of us, hang in front of us for about a minute, and then go way behind the mountains. And all the way through this, Jeremy and I were kind of behaved very oddly. That we didn't speak, except for at the one point when Jeremy goes, "I'm not even going to take a picture." And I'm going, which in my head I'm going, that's weird, but I didn't respond to him. So neither of us did anything. We just calmly, neither of us got excited. None of us said anything. We weren't, that wasn't like those clips you see online all the time of people going, "Holy fuck, what the fuck?"
Yeah.
Because that apparently that's the language of seeing a UFO is
it's
fuck.
hard to argue with.
Yeah, but we had neither one of us had any emotional response, even though Jeremy has dedicated his life to this subject, and I, at that point had, dedicated a number of my years to seriously thinking about this. Mm-hmm. So you think, this would be a really exciting moment for the two of us. No excitement whatsoever, no emotion of any kind from either of us. And it wasn't until after it had gone away that we started talking.
Right.
So it seemed to me like the thing we were looking at was setting the rules for how we would behave while we were looking at it. The fact that both of us behaved in exactly the same way, which is a bizarre way for either of us to have behaved.
Yeah. And I think with, as we discussed, with a vast majority of some of the most famous kind of anecdotal sightings, experiences, abductions, there is no question that there is heavy interaction on the level of consciousness with people, memory, fogginess. Our friend Jean Anzulis, who was in on episode 9, I believe, with her incredible experiencer story, she was communicated with. Her parents had very different, but still impactful experiences with consciousness, whether it's they, were aware of things but couldn't move, they were foggy, they were, couldn't explain their actions, couldn't explain their inactions. So yeah, there's no question that if you take any of this, the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of stories and interactions and experiences, there's no question that consciousness plays a role. So, is it such a big leap that this would somehow be turned into a form of technology?
No, and also, let's also look at things that we talked about, like the autistic savants, or who have these amazing abilities, like like the can store, just basically seem to have access to vast volumes of information at their fingertips. That they can tell you what day of the week it was at a certain year, when's up of the month. They basically can just give you calendar dates out of nowhere, or factor huge numbers, or just they seem to be able to just access information the way a computer accesses information from the cloud. And we have no explanation for it. We have no explanation for people who suffer traumatic head injuries and can suddenly speak French. That's a lot of knowledge that is suddenly in their heads that wasn't there before, like a day before. So how does that get in there except by some form of download? And we kind of accept stories of scientists and artists, mathematicians, who all tell stories of receiving downloads, of suddenly being somehow given vast amounts of information instantaneously. And these stories, there's lots of these stories. And so there's clearly a mechanism for this to happen.
Here's this is completely, totally self-serving, and sure, you can call it this book, my new book. It's for kids. It's for 12 and up. In meditation, I came up with this in a meditation. I don't even meditate that much.
I've never meditated. I want to learn.
It is. I have very, very specific memories of inspiration, creative inspiration. Something feels dropped in, just dropped in. And again, I'm a very sporadic meditator, a big believer, a big proponent of it. And I do think that it's the sort of, it's a gentle superpower. If you don't quite have the appetite for DMT or some of these extreme experiences to break through the membrane, so to speak, this is, I think meditation is the, it's the vehicle for doing that in a more, less jarring way. But I think the results can be just as incredible. And I have found it to be an extraordinary resource for creativity.
Yeah.
Also, it just relieves anxiety, and it's good for your health, and it can do all sorts of good things for your body and mind, and is so proven. But so
there you have a mechanism, a proposed mechanism for information coming in. And then there's the notion of, well, what about information going out? Like, in terms of, like, I remember years ago talking with Jeremy, and we were talking about the story had come out, I forget what it was, but a discussion about whether or not UFOs were controlled through telepathy, through some sort of mind-machine meld between the pilots and the craft themselves. And when we were talking about it, Jeremy was telling me about this, and the first thing that came into my head was, well, all right. I said, well, human beings are already exploring this, because there's a project at Princeton called the Global Consciousness Project. They've since renamed it, but it's been going on for over 20 years. They actually started it just after 9/11, but it was a project started out with the idea of if you have they would bring in undergrads and have them concentrate on basically a coin flip machine and see if they could get it to go beyond chance. See if they could get patterns that aren't chance, get more heads than tails in a significant way. And they kept finding that they could. And so they kept doing it, and they kept let's bring other students in, see if it's just this student who has an ability, and they kept bringing people in, and it kept happening. So they kept getting this data saying that if you concentrate on a machine, you can affect it just with your thoughts. So then they decided to set up random number generators all around the globe at different institutes around the globe to see if what happens when there's an event where there's massive concentration on a single event, and would that focused consciousness affect these machines. They happened to set it up right before 9/11 happened. And when that happened, they found that, all of these machines went off randomness. These were random number generators that started producing patterns that had the chances for it being by chance was something like in the billions to 1 against. And not only that, but a lot of these machines went off randomness just before 9/11 happened. So there was even some sort of a backward, perhaps, information traveling backward in time occurring. So, and that program is still, that study is still ongoing. It still keeps acquiring data that keeps confirming it, and of course, it keeps being criticized and dismissed. But they just keep piling up more and more data. So you've got that, and then also, yes, as we said before earlier, with the telepathy tapes, that we have this group of humans, a cohort of humans who are not, non-speaking autistic people, and they seem to be able to. Well, first of all, parents of these kids were told their kids weren't inside there. There was nobody home.
Right.
And they would never be able to communicate with these kids.
They're given educations that are, sort of preschool type educations. They're taught, alphabets, and they've been
finger painting, and
many of these parents have spent a decade and a half or more assuming there's no there there, that they're just there, that most of their child is just sort of these collection of symptoms, and then they're somewhat shocked and in some cases horrified to realize that there was such a active life,
intellect
within.
And emotional life going on, interests in things like science and history and languages, that these kids were things they were able to do in their heads, but weren't able to communicate because they couldn't speak, and they had very little control over their bodies, which is part of why they can't speak, because speaking is a physical activity.
Yeah, well, this goes to one of the most poignant and fascinating details, and I would love for us to maybe just talk a lot more about the telepathy tapes on our next app, because we could talk days and days about it. Just very briefly, there's a sort of assisted writing, typing into these machines, and these kids often need. It was slightly controversial at the beginning of this.
And apparently still is. There's
type of communication.
There's a huge pushback against teaching these kids to type. To spell.
To spell, because
to communicate that way.
It started because they needed sort of assistance, because they have such a difficult relationship with their body and making their body do what they wanted to do. And one of the descriptions when they were able to communicate, and some are just able to communicate and just touch their forehead, it basically just brings them into their body a little bit and sort of reminds them, because some of them need reminding that they have a body. Some of these kids reported that they didn't understand that they had hands. And to me, there's something so amazing and poetic about almost like they're almost in and halfway in and halfway out. Like if this telepathy, they discuss this sort of in the podcast of like, do they have kind of greater access to some sort of ubiquitous consciousness because they're not fully in their bodies? They don't. There's almost have this in between relationship.
Yeah, and the thing that they're reporting, and they're reporting that. And again, once these kids are able to do this typing, they're writing poetry, they're discussing philosophy, they're expressing their interest in history. So all these things are coming out, but they all report how difficult it is to communicate that way. To communicate in language is difficult, and for them, telepathic communication is just almost instantaneous. It's like a wall of information comes at you again, like a download. Yeah, and it's like a download where you're not just sharing through words. And this ties into something I heard Jeffrey Hinton, who was one of the godfathers of modern AI. He's one of the guys who came up with the notion of using neural networks instead of symbolic AI, which was trying to just brute force teach computers how to understand language and symbolism. So they call it symbolic AI as opposed to neural net AI. And because he said the assumption used to be that consciousness is basically language in the middle, and language out, and that it was all symbolic through language. But what they discovered with neural nets is that it's the language in is a funnel you've got to get through. It's like like trying to force yourself through a keyhole, and then in the middle is this huge mass of information, and then on the output is whatever you can fit through the funnel going out, and that's language again. Though we take in information through language, we create this huge mass of information there, and then we have to force it out through the other end. And
a lot of things need to work to make that achievable, right?
Yeah.
It's like you need not just the ability to think and communicate in language, you need the physical facility to do it.
Yes.
Either through some sort of
language,
use of your hands or your mouth or your lips and tongues and all that stuff.
Yes, and because language is basically a technology we developed, and it's not like it didn't sort of come naturally, and it's a constriction on how quickly you can convey information, and it's a really, really slowing constriction, and that's what they learned in AI, and that's why AI can take in your questions and pump out an incredible volume of information immediately, because it doesn't have it isn't dealing in language in the middle. It's dealing with just data.
Right.
So language is a roadblock. It's a speed limit for information, and these kids are saying they don't live with that speed limit, and they also describe being a next step in human evolution, that they are here for a reason, and they talk about it amongst themselves. They communicate in groups. There's the sections where they meet on what they call the hill, and have social interactions through telepathy. And they're saying they're here. They all discuss that they have a mission, that they have a purpose in being here, and a purpose in existing, and that is that they are supposed to be helping guide us to a next level of consciousness.
Yeah, the hill thing, it's for those that haven't listened, and again, this is the telepathy tapes, and it's there's this sort of psychic gathering ground that these non-speaking kids, a lot of cases teenagers, some young adults who have 100% accuracy with their telepathic communication with their parents and caregivers, and then also have a slight cure for their loneliness because they gather in some psychic gathering place they call the hill. I would just love, I want to, so we have this kind of sort of
overlapping
support overlapping to the Jake Barber story to sort of to somewhat fortify this idea of psionic assets. Now I need to bring up this thing that does bug me, and maybe you can reassure me, or maybe not. But at the end of the Coulthard story, and again, it's really compelling stuff from Jake Barber. It always, and I like, there's this moment where and Jake now has a group called Skywatchers, which is a group of psionic UFO summoners, and they're out there, and I hear they've, according to Ross Coulthard, Silicon Valley has given them millions of dollars in the hopes that they're going to recover some sort of NHI tech, and it all sounds very futuristic and interesting, but to me, I heard that and I winced. I just was like, I was okay. So now, is this going to be a TV show? And is this going to be? And it just gets me a little. I just find it a troublesome aspect of this entire thing. Is this sort of fence sitting with a kind of commercialization of this, and the uneasy partnership between entertainment and what this is. And I don't know what Skywatchers is. It could be absolutely, completely, 1,000% authentic. And maybe what else are these people going to do if they leave the military, and like, if they believe in this, and maybe it's going to raise our consciousness. But part of me just reacts when I hear that. And should I be concerned, or do you think that's just where we are in these days?
Well, I think there's we have to kind of, we have our prejudices and our suspicions about anything that comes out of government, and the intelligence community. People are very suspicious of it, but we also have this frustration that the government is refusing to tell us what they know, and the only people who know what's inside are the people who have been inside. And so they're really the only people that are in a position to push this out into the public if the government won't do it. So the people we're going to have to rely on are going to have to be people like Lou Elizondo. They're going to have to be people like Jacob Barber and David Fravor, and the people who have been inside, because they're the only ones who've had access to the information along with all of the equipment and data gathering necessary to make sense of these things.
Should I be concerned about the monetization of this of these experiences?
No. I mean, everything has to be funded. Everything has to be paid for. It's like like what Avi Loeb is doing at Harvard.
Yep. He's got to raise money to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, Galileo, Harvard wasn't going to give him the money to do it.
Very hard to get money for research into this topic.
Yeah, there are no grants, so he's relying on rich people. So a lot of rich people are giving him a lot of money to do this research. Otherwise, it just wouldn't happen. Gary Nolan has talked a lot about how kind of the thing that holds him back is that the like doing testing on materials is really, really expensive.
Yeah,
and he's and Stanford's not going to pay him to do it.
The Saul, the whole Saul thing was more or less a kind of pro bono get together. Part of it was people trying to get some funding for legitimate research purposes, and I agree with you. I mean, it's a challenge, and what I would say is even if Skywatcher sounds a little like Skinwalker, and then you've got the Skinwalker Ranch, which is a very successful TV show. However, by all accounts, they're doing legitimate research there.
Yeah, well, they're definitely putting out Skywalker. Yeah, the Secrets of Skywalker Ranch show. And I'm going to guess they aren't putting out everything they have. But the stuff they've put out is really compelling and hard to discount.
Well, and I just would say for the skeptics out there, we are well aware there, and anyone who looks into this knows that serious research has been happening at Skinwalker Ranch decades before there was ever any show about it.
Yes, going back to the 90s with NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Science. With
some of the most historic and meaningful research into this issue took place at Skinwalker Ranch. So I'm making the counter to my just raising my hand and saying, like, should we just an awareness of these people. Jake Barber has friends from the same programs that have been in government, apparently at very high levels of the military, and they are now a group called Skywatchers, and apparently they have some funding from Silicon Valley folks because they're going to be summoning UFOs, and
they claim they've already had success with their program, and their goal is to, by the end of the year, present their findings. Okay. And they keep saying by the end of the year we're going to, we'll present everything. Everything's going to be transparent. Everything's going to be public.
I'll be here for it. I'll be here for it.
Yeah,
we'll be here for it.
Again, I have a strong bias against Stephen Greer. who has been an advocate for disclosure for many years, but there's something about him that I don't trust. I don't, and it's certainly a distrust that is shared by a lot of people, but there's probably things that I'm missing that I should be paying attention to that come from Greer just because I don't trust him.
Listen, there's we know the culture. There's a culture. There's a sort of ecosystem that is, it's kind of a media ecosystem for this subject matter. And there are some people that, want to make money doing it. And there's real research happening within it. And sometimes people are doing both. And
there's an opportunity for charlatanism.
Yes.
In any field where there's a strong need that isn't being met, and goes all the way back to the rainmakers, during the Dust Bowl days.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people charlatans will pop up in a vacuum.
Well, by all accounts, this Jake Barber fellow is not that.
No.
There seems to be legitimate.
Seems like a man has been profoundly affected by what happened.
Certainly
to
seems
him.
to have gone through something. Yes, profound. I agree.
Yes, that he believes is still affecting him. That he believes is still guiding him, and even he went so far as to say that the thing he was in contact with that day is protecting him. He said he believes he's not worried about repercussions because he believes he is being protected by the non-human intelligence.
Well, things continue to remain interesting, Dave, and I think for all our viewers and listeners, keep your eyes on this space, and we'll keep looking into all this plenty to sort of go through the past few months and what's currently happening and what's going to be happening here on Really. And it was great to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. And again, for the scientific community out there, please continue with your smug dismissals. Condescending jokes, should we call them?
I mean, it's just all looking. It's all just looking real. I don't know, just kind of sad at this point. It's just the dam is breaking, and we're here for it.
Yeah, and it's it's really right now. It's a question of how foolish do you want to feel in a very short period of time.
Yeah, things are happening very quickly, and the stuff we discussed today seems to be just more of the tip of the iceberg, and interesting stuff ahead.
Yeah,
looking forward to next time, pal. We'll talk more about it.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
All right, buddy.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.